that.
That's
okay,
right.
so this, I'm just saying to the recording, this is the practice lab, and we are about to meet David. So who are you, David?
Hey, hi, everybody. So I'm in Columbus, Ohio. I teach at a small private Christian school, and I teach a study skills class. I don't know if you're familiar with Lockett learning.
No.
It's a smarter, not harder. Sharon Lockett. I've been using her stuff for a number of years, and
Great.
as I've augmented and learned different things over the years, I sort of fell into teaching the study cycle, but I didn't call it the study cycle. I called it the learning cycle. And then as I did more research online, I found a 5-step process, and then I found you. And you're only 3 steps. So
I know. By design.
Yeah.
Great. And were you at the master class, or are you familiar enough with the study cycle that you feel like you could practice teaching it from memory with my study cycle?
Yeah, I mean, I've taught. So I've taught it in, over the past couple of years, and then just recently when I came across your system. Then I've been actually using that in my study skills class.
Oh,
so,
beautiful. I look forward to maybe hearing a little bit more about that in a bit. Great. Okay, this is very helpful. Thank you. Nice to meet you, David.
Okay, now, you know, I may step away, but I'm still here. I'm cleaning up the kitchen.
Okay. Well, there will be a moment when we may go into practice partners, not for long, but if you can listen for that and be there for it, that would be awesome.
Yeah. I'm just like a few feet away.
Perfect. That's what's so fun about all this online stuff, is we get to see each other, be in each other's homes. Anyway, maybe one more person. I'd love to hear from you, and if you have some experience with the study cycle, and everybody else can put your answers into the chat. To the new folks, I'm just gauging exactly how I'm going to take us today. So I'll just pause to see if anybody else. Kathy, yes, yeah. Great.
Okay, so I did the study cycle with a student I'm working with who is studying for his MCAT.
Ah, how did that go?
I think he liked it, and he was open to it. He's had a lot of support all through kindergarten through 12th grade, and then he went to special ed college and did some science courses at Lynn University. So he's gotten a lot of support along the way. And he's an interesting learner in that he doesn't really take notes. He listens very actively. And that works for him. But he was open to drawing and doing more testing along the way. So
great.
Because he has a very scientific kind of brain, and he loves biology and chemistry and science.
Yes.
He liked the model of encoding and then being able to retrieve. So I said, how do you know if you've gotten it, and how do you test yourself? So it was good.
Yeah. Did he have some ideas, if he's taking in lectures really auditorily? Did he have some ideas about how he can practice retrieval?
He has these study sheets that he's working with, and it has questions on them, and that's what he has to find out by reading or listening to some lectures. He also goes on YouTube and listens to lectures a lot. That seems to help him.
So I'm hearing lots of encoding there. Lots of encoding.
So I said, well, when do you go back and see if you can answer the questions without using anything exterior, just from your brain? Are you doing enough of that? And he said he could do more of that.
Yeah, so that will be your that will be your trick with him, is to find ways that he's willing to do that. My first thought is just that he needs a study buddy because after a lecture, he can talk out loud and share with his study buddy his major takeaways. And so that would be a form of retrieval, just as an example.
That would be hard for him.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be hard. So he would, but that's an example of one thing. Yeah. I'm seeing Lisa's here with her son who homeschools. Yay, you're in the process of learning the study cycle together. Okay. Excellent. Excellent. So here's where I want to go today. I still would love to hear about some more of you who are in the room, where you are at with knowing the study cycle and whether you're an educator or a family, parent, student combo perhaps. But for right now, let me show you the agenda. And I just muted everybody, by the way. I think we learned at *6. Those of you on the phone, if you need to unmute yourself. So here's our agenda for the day. It's so funny. Backwards, this looks like it says chicken. I was like, why did I write the word chicken? So check-ins, which we've just done, plus any questions. And so I would like to know if there are major questions any of you who have tried the study cycle already have that you would really like to get to unpack today. Please put those in the chat as well. I'm going to share my slides in just a moment, and we're going to look at the 3 strategic study skill sets because those map really nicely onto the study cycle and help kind of give a different understanding of the study cycle. Then I'm going to share the full list of the mini lectures that I teach, and a little theory, just a little additional theory that I just added the slide today, so I didn't have time to put it on the worksheet. Speaking of the worksheet, I did put the link to it in the chat. If you don't have it printed out, it's okay, but it might be nice for everybody to have it open so that you can have the instructions for the study cycle in front of you. We'll do a little retrieval practice. So that will be a time when this will be the interesting, tricky time. Our retrieval practice labs in the Art of Inspiring Students work really well because everybody who's taking the class makes sure that their Zoom works and they have total audio and video access. But if you know for sure that you do not have audio access today, it would be helpful to have you put that into the chat, because I am going to break people up into partners for just a few minutes and give you a little assignment. And if you don't think you'll be able to interact with your partner, let us know in the chat so that I don't put you into a little breakout. Then at the very end, we'll look at some kind of advanced teaching tips for those of you who specifically are educators interested in figuring out how to incorporate the study cycle. Before I share my screen, though, I want to just give us the visual image. There we go. So, you know, I'm obsessed with my whiteboards. I also put a sticker on the back of my whiteboards and I mail these to all of my clients so that they have whiteboards that they can use during our sessions to do. And one of the strategic study skill sets we're going to look at today has to do with, is the reason why I send the whiteboards. But I just wanted to give you the visual image of the study cycle. Hopefully everybody knows it by now. It doesn't sound like there's anybody who's brand new. And so just reminding you, step 1, this is our basket of knowledge and skills, right? So step 1 is getting information into the brain. Step 2 is, and actually I drew this wrong when I made this. This was a long time ago. I prefer now to actually have the arrow go to the actual brain rather than the cheek. I know that might seem silly to focus on that, but I really find it just, the visuals are so helpful to fine tune them. So step 2 is retrieving, when we're testing ourselves and assessing ourselves. And then step 3 over here on the encoding side is encoding in a new way. Now, somebody oh, it was you, Lisa, right? I think it was you, the homeschooler, who emailed me, and I haven't emailed you back yet, but I actually wanted to address something that you said in the email, which I was so grateful for. So I'm just going to say it was Lisa, emailed saying that actually the learning cycle does make more sense to her, like that phrase, than study cycle. And we just heard that from David a little earlier too, right? The learning cycle. And actually, the phrase learning cycle is more accurate about the study cycle. However, I call it the study cycle just because that's what I got used to calling it, and that's what all my materials call it. And plus, I'm a sucker for alliteration, and study cycle just is more fun to say and memorable. And also, I'm really wanting students to see that they can take studying into their own hands. So, but I want to redraw this, because this is actually, if I could start over again, probably how I would have all of my graphics created for the study cycle. with not step one, but with our basket here. I'm just going fast here, so that's messy, but our basket of knowledge and skills here. And actually, I would have drawn the head and the student here. And so step one is learning it for the first time. Step two is testing yourself to see what you know and what you don't know. And then step three is encoding in a new way. And then the study cycle is encoding, retrieving, encoding, retrieving, encoding, retrieving until you know whatever it is you need to know. So it's almost more like a snail than it is just the study cycle. So I just wanted to name this in case this is useful for anyone to see it this way. Oh, Beth, you're so cute. The learning loop. Excellent. Well, maybe on the next iteration of all of my materials. So, also one more thing, since I know Lisa is homeschooling in here with her son, so hi. The other thing to say is, even though we're using the word study, and even if you don't take tests, and a lot of homeschoolers don't take tests, it's still this idea of practicing retrieval is still really relevant no matter what you're learning if you're wanting it to stay in your long-term memory. And so no matter what it is, let's just say you go to a museum with your family, and then you talk about like what really stood out from this museum, who remembers what facts do you remember? That family conversation is an act of retrieval that helps burn the information even more deeply into your brain. It also actually, as you listen to your family members, it helps encode information. So that's an example of where encoding and retrieving are happening at the same time. So the more we can do all of this, the better. I want to name, I'm seeing myself get sweaty, so I just wanted to name, it's 85 degrees in here, and I have my windows closed because I don't want the traffic noise to get in the way. So I grabbed my grandmother's handkerchief. Of course, I don't know where I put it, so I'll just deal with that. But if you notice that, that's what's going on here. It's very hot over here. So let me see, we've got 11 people and a few new names. I'm going to share my screen, and while I'm doing that, oh, it wasn't you, Lisa. Okay, but that was helpful, good. I would like to just have other people checking in the chat if you're new with whether you're a parent or an educator and how familiar you are with the study cycle. If you don't have access to audio, please say that too, so that when I'm doing the breakouts, I can pay attention to that. And Summer, who's in the room, by the way, is my assistant for the day. And Summer, maybe you could be making a list of the people who don't want to be, specifically can't be in breakouts, or if you don't want to be in a breakout, that's fine too, although I encourage you, they're kind of fun. So, or at least anti-boring, right? If Summer, you could be keeping track for me, that would be great. So, okay, let's do these strategic study skill sets. And if you have the worksheet, this is where we're going to be working on this page of the worksheet today. We're going to be filling these 3 out, if that's useful for you. Present. Great. And share my screen. So let's make sure you can see this first of all. I think everyone can see the 3 strategic study skill sets. Beth, I'm looking at you. Can you nod your head if you can see it? Yes, okay, good. All right. So embedded in the study, I want you to see if you can notice how these are embedded in the study cycle as we go today. There we go. So the first strategic study skill set, this is what does it mean to study strategically, is that we need to get active. And I know this is a little hard to read, this comic strip, but I love to use it. I need to figure out how I can buy the rights to a bigger version of it. There is, this kid is sitting here saying, you're not taking notes. And this kid over here has an audio recorder of the lecture. And this one explains, I record the lectures, then use voice recognition software on my computer to transcribe it when I get home. That way, I'm free to take in the lecture without note-taking to distract me. And then, there he is, falling asleep because he's being passive. Now, some students, like we heard at the top of the call, really can actively listen. My dad is an example of this kind of person. He stays very engaged auditorily, but most of us are not that person. So one of the things I like to tell students is it's very important for you to take responsibility for stopping boring your brain. That the choices, even if you feel like your teacher is boring, that doesn't mean that you have to bore your brain with the way you listen to your teacher or listen to whatever the situation is. So if you are sitting still for a long time, you are most likely not learning, or at least not learning well. And it's important for you to choose study strategies that are so interesting that you can't help but stay engaged. And using all your senses, or as many strategies as possible. I teach a model in one of my mini lectures called the study senses, which is a nice 4-step checklist. But we also want you to just have this overflowing toolbox of strategies for how you can get active, because some won't work in some learning situations and some will. So here's the key question. And if you have the worksheet, I put these questions at the bottom with little blanks to fill in the blank. But I like to have my clients reflecting about how can I get better and better at noticing when I'm being a passive learner versus an active learner. As an academic coach, that's really important to me that students are developing their metacognition. They're developing the skill of thinking about their own thinking. And so the first step is to catch yourself and start noticing, when am I being passive? When am I being active? And then the next step is, how can I more often make active choices? So that's our strategic study skill set number 1, is skills for how to get active. All right, let's do the next one. Skill number 2 is get manipulative. So this is a word that I refer to, well, I guess I'll let you, we'll define it by looking at the slides. That will be more organized. So here are some images of some graphic organizers or some visual organizers. And getting manipulative means learning how to move information around. In other words, making information your own. Most students have no idea how to do this themselves. We are so, oh, let's not do the key question yet. We are so used to looking at the book, taking notes in the order of the book, or listening to the teacher, taking notes in the order of the teacher, structuring our learning in the way the expert structured their learning. And by the way, homeschoolers, since I know you're here, this is a wonderful skill for you to practice specifically in your own learning. So how do you get manipulative with what you're learning? How do you take it from the way the expert showed it and put it in a different model that that is all your own? And sometimes, actually, let me stop sharing my screen for a quick moment. Sometimes I will, after I teach the study cycle, I will ask students, can you think of another way that you could organize this information that makes sense to your brain? Because this is my brain's beauty, you know, that came up with this. And if it works for you, use it. But let's take a moment to see if you can manipulate it yourself and come up with your own model. And frankly, this model, this step 1, step 2, and step 3 did not come from me. This came from a student. This is how one of my students chose to manipulate the study cycle herself, because this made more sense to her. And it turned out that when she did it, I was like, oh my God, that makes more sense than my original. Too bad I didn't think of it. So this is just one example of how manipulation can take place. So let's look at this key question now. So when am I depending on the teacher's way of structuring information? And for homeschoolers, I know you may not have a teacher necessarily, but you could put expert there. When am I depending on the expert's way of structuring information? How can I get more and more skilled at finding my own structure for the information and skills that I'm learning? By the way, y'all, if questions are coming up for you around any of this and you put it in the chat, Summer is grabbing your questions and throwing it into the Google Doc for me so that we don't lose track of them. So don't feel like you have to wait to ask. You can just put the question in there if it comes up. So this is skill number 2. Skill number 3, this final, it's probably not the final skill, but the final one for now in this model, get quizzable. And so here's a picture of some flashcards. Flashcards are not the only way that students can quiz themselves about information, but certainly they're one of the most common ways that teachers prescribe and parents prescribe too. I just had a client who was studying for a Spanish test, and her dad wanted her to make flashcards, and she and I had come up with a really different study plan, but he went into his freak out about she's not studying enough. And for him, seeing her make flashcards meant that she was studying better. So she texted me and she's like, Dad wants me to make flashcards, but we had this other plan for how I'm going to quiz myself. And so I talked her through it. I talked to the dad and it was all okay. But flashcards are, just because that's what you did when you were in school doesn't necessarily mean that it's always the best choice for students. So what it means to get quizzable is that you are developing tools to prove to yourself that you know the information. You don't just feel it. Then you use multiple quizzable study tools. So you know in different environments, like in a certain environment, flashcards might be the right thing to do. Actually, specifically, this young woman said that it was a grammar that was on the test, and she wasn't quite sure how to use flashcards to test herself for conjugations. And so we used the whiteboard actually, and she practiced conjugating things out on a whiteboard and checked herself in her textbook. So that worked in that setting, but there are lots of different kinds of quizzable study tools that we can use. I teach maybe about 7 to 10 in the anti-boring approach, but you know, there are hundreds of ways to quiz yourself. You also, if you're quizzing, need to assess yourself accurately. Are you seeing how this maps to the study cycle? With effective answer keys, and I spend a lot of time with students on making sure that they know how to find or create effective answer keys for themselves. And then also, you need to be able to design foolproof study plans for yourself that center around quizzing and assessing, encoding in a new way. Yeah, there's a key question. And so quizzing and assessing and encoding in a new way. So once you really understand the study cycle, you have lots of different tools for each side of the study cycle. Then you can make what I call in my course a backwards plan. And you can figure out, how do I work with these two parts, these two kinds of activities, and how do I do that over time to make sure that I am prepared for whatever the test is. Even if your test is a speech, right? Where you're not necessarily being tested by having to write down right answers, but you have to stand in front of a group and see what you know. The quizzing and assessing and encoding in a new way are still relevant. They're relevant in most situations. So the key question here is, how can I take responsibility for proving to myself that I know what I need to know in order to confidently take the test? Did I write that down on the worksheet? Yes, I did write that down correctly on the worksheet. Or I didn't? I did. Here on the worksheet, I don't know if you all can see that because I can't see myself right now. So how can I take responsibility for proving? This idea of proving is really important. And I'm not proving to the teacher or to the expert. I'm proving to myself that I know what I need to know in order to confidently take the test. So those are the 3 strategic study skill sets. And I want to show you how the mini lectures in the Art of Inspiring Students, which is also the anti-boring approach, how they line up with the 3 skill sets. So first, the first where we have the study cycle, that teaches the science of learning. And I have 4 that are specifically what I call the science of learning. And then in terms of getting active and getting manipulative, that's where the study senses come in, and also where the hone it notes come in my note-taking section, because you're learning to manipulate your notes. Then on the other side of the study cycle, we have get active and get quizable in terms of knowing quizable study tools, and then also learning about spaced retrieval. And I mentioned that briefly at the masterclass on Monday, that retrieval is the act of testing yourself, and spaced retrieval is the act of testing yourself over time. And I have a specific mini lecture that I figured out how to teach that really proves to students why it is important to do it over time. Because sometimes they just hear us say, right, like, oh, I shouldn't do it last minute. I know I shouldn't cram. Like, they know they shouldn't, but they don't really understand from a brain-based perspective why. So that's why that piece right here is so helpful. And then as I was making the slide today, I realized, so I've always called my time management mini lecture Get in Gear. And I was like, oh my God, it's another get. So actually, maybe there are 4 strategic study skill sets, because the 4th one really is, once you know how to get active, get manipulative, and get quizable, how do you get in gear with that? How do you actually make plans and follow through with your plans? And it's there that the piece of brain science around working memory is super helpful for students. I wonder if I can show you. I have all these whiteboards right here now. I think I deleted it or wiped it down already. I just taught working memory to, oh no, wait, here they are. This is fun. You can actually see my remnants of my coaching in action. So I'll tell a quick story, client story really quickly. It was my first session with a student. I had just met her. And I thought we were going to do all of our setup stuff. And we're on Zoom, and she checks in. I said, how are you today? And she's like, oh, I've been sick and I've missed school for the last 2 days. Oh, so I thought, oh my goodness, I'm an academic coach. So already it's like out the window goes all of the setup tasks that I felt we needed to do. And instead I said, okay, well, are you open to me sharing a little bit of brain theory with you around how memory works? And are you open, because I knew she didn't have a planner, are you open to figuring out how a planner might work in your life? And I have another mini lecture that's not in, well, it probably will be in this round of the course. I've just finally developed it. And the way I develop these mini lectures is I notice after about 5 clients, if I notice I'm saying the exact same thing in the exact same way to the client, and it takes 10 minutes or less, and then I notice that the client can teach it back to me, then it's become a mini lecture. So anyway, I have one on planners coming up, but this is the whiteboard. This just gives you the visual image of my mini lecture about working memory. She had braids. I always like to draw the hair that my students have. And these were a couple days ago, so that's why they look a little erased. And this is the mini lecture on planners that I'm developing. So this was the whiteboard that I created for her around that. So we don't have time to explain all of these today, but I hope what you're getting is this idea of the power. I don't have the slide available right now, but from the masterclass, I said mini lectures, you know, are specific and they're streamlined and they're visible. And so what I'm wanting you to get is how visible all of these are. I'm about to share my screen one more time, but while I'm talking about things being visible, where did the Get In? Oh, here it is. So the Get In Gear mini lecture actually has toys that go along with it. I forget if I showed this on Monday. I don't think so. And one of the coaches that I'm training right now, she's been through Art of Inspiring Students. She bought her gears already. She showed them to me. But so this is your sincere desire to get work done. This is the work that needs to get done. These 4 things are the 4 things you need to be able to do in order to have your sincere desire actually activate your work. And so that's how I structure that mini lecture. And I knew it was successful one day when the next week a client came to me. And she sat down in my chair over there rather than where she normally sits. And the Getting Gear was right down there next to it because I'd used it with a previous client. And she pulled it up and she said, well, Gretchen, I think you need some work on time management. Let me teach you. And she almost word for word taught me back what the 4 gears were. And she'd remembered them from one week to the other. And that's when I went, okay, that's a new mini lecture. That is good. So back to the slides, just for a little bit more. I grabbed this slide. I just noticed it this morning, and it's from the course, Art of Inspiring Students. It's from week 2, about how the brain, like about the other brain mini lectures. And what I like about this is it's the best visual I can see about my method, where these two things really need to happen. Many people just teach study strategies. They only teach this side, strategies for learning, for how to learn better. Some people do teach the theory about how the brain works, but I have seen very rare folks out there are able to teach how these two come together and support each other, so that to really help students understand the why for how all the strategies work. And I noticed when I was making this part of the slide today that the mini lectures kind of line up, that these are all the mini lectures about how the brain works. And then these are the mini lectures that really point to specific strategies for how to learn better. And there are more strategies than just 6, right? I say that, and I counted, there are about 47 tools on this, do we have it? Yeah, on this wheel that people end up with by the end. But anyway, just a different way to be thinking about how the mini lectures work. And I really encourage you to, like, if you leave this class today and go off into the world and you don't come into learning the rest of my tools, at least for yourself, see how you can figure out how to connect these two things better, so that whenever you teach a strategy, you're also teaching a piece of brain science to help students understand why that's important. So we're going to have just a few slides about the course coming up, and then we're going to dive deeply into practicing the study cycle together. So this is Adam. He's a college instructor. He actually teaches sociology down in Southern California. And he said, after taking Art of Inspiring Students, I knew most of the research you were drawing upon, but you put it together in a streamlined, efficient way that makes presenting it to students both easier and more effective instead of piecemeal. And that just moved me to hear him say that, because that is what I do feel like my superpower is crafting crafting complex things and making them streamlined. So I was so thrilled to know that I'd done that here. So in the course that's coming up, this is just going to be a list of what's in the course, and you will have access to the Anti-Boring Approach to Powerful Studying online course, which for homeschool families you might choose to do on your own. Oh, Joy, I just saw you popped in. Awesome, good timing. I'll come to you in a second. Sample scripts for the mini lectures, and I put 7+ because I'm always adding mini lectures. Like you just heard me say, I'm adding the one about the planner this time around. The tools for time management, organization, study, and note-taking. There's a workbook. It's actually more than 30 pages, I think. Maybe somebody who has a workbook printed out can tell me. And then video excerpts from my coaching sessions with real teens, and then a Facebook group and an online portal for follow-up questions. And I don't know if I didn't put the training calls on here, but there are 8 training calls as well. Not everyone can always come to all the training calls, but what you're about to experience in this little mini retrieval practice that we're about to do is an example of what we do in one of the kinds of calls. And then also you get a certificate of completion if you want, and you can get graduate credits if you want. I'm looking into getting professional development for teachers in the state of Illinois, because I have a number of teachers coming from Illinois. Maybe I can get it for your state if you feel like you would take it, if you could get those units. So just a reminder, and Summer, if you could put the link into the chat, that there is $100 off if folks feel like they can dive in before this Friday. If you can't actually pay before this Friday, but you know you want to dive in, feel free to email me about that. But to access your $100 off coupon, you use, I just was silly this time, Armadillo, if you can do a full pay. And Penguin, if you can do 6 payments. So if this is it all compelling, or if you feel like you need to talk to me to find out if this would be relevant to you, I know a number of parents have some questions about whether this would be relevant, feel free to email me and just say, hey, Gretchen, can we pop on the phone, and I can make some time to do that tomorrow. I think, yep. I have to make these slides really organized. I don't know if you can tell about me, I'm such a verbal processor that if I don't tell myself what's next in a slide, it won't happen. So Joy just popped in. And before we move to the Retrieval Practice Lab, I want to give Joy a moment to share some stories with you all. She just came from a date with her son and she's popping in for a moment. But Joy is who took my course as a parent, right? Like you weren't thinking you were going to become an academic coach when you took the course, I don't think.
So I didn't think I was going to become an academic coach while I was taking the anti-boring approach to powerful studying with my son. So I've totally changed my life in less than a year. I was an HR consultant, working for myself for over 9 years, and my daughter was struggling, so she's been coded for all 3 learning disabilities. She has ADHD for attention and anxiety. And so she started seeing an academic coach who was showing me stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, this is great. I could really use it for my son, who's your typical, last year, he was a middle schooler, your typical 13-year-old boy. And so I was showing him things, and then I was sent a link to Gretchen's Masterclass, and I watched the video, and I was blown away, and I said, oh my God, I have to do the anti-boring approach with my son. So over spring break, I'm the best mom ever. I sat my son down, and we did the anti-boring approach to powerful studying every single day during his spring break. I
Poor
got
guy.
Mom of the Year for that one. And he, could not believe that a lot of what I was already showing him was correct. So he hated the fact that I was right. And what he really liked was a lot of Gretchen's mini lectures. I'm a mom and I'm not a coach. And so I would explain things to him and he'd look at me with this vacant look on his face. And then he watched Gretchen's mini lectures and he was really like, oh, now I get it. And so I was inspired by that. And I said, I think I really want to do this. And I was reading books at the same time. And I became very motivated, very inspired. And I signed up for the AISSS class. And I did that. And I joined late because I was doing everything late, but I caught up and I loved it. I finished everything. I even got my certificate. And then I took the Launch Your Biz afterwards. I'm a big Gretchen fan. I'm sold on all of her products.
Yeah, and so now Joy didn't know when she started this whole process that she was going to be starting her own business. So I wanted Joy to be able to share, especially with you, because we had so many parents around as well, to show the relationship between the anti-boring approach is a course for $197 that you can take by itself. But then the Art of Inspiring Students is the one for educators or parents who consider themselves educators who want to understand the brain theory more deeply. And so maybe, Joy, the last thing I'll ask you is, what would your advice be? Like, what's the extra, if people are thinking, oh, if I can just do the anti-boring approach for $197 and kind of get the tools, what would your advice, like, who is this appropriate for? And then what's the added benefit one gets from this?
So for me as a parent, if I could think of my friends, for instance, who are also interested in helping their kids, if all you want to do is, as a parent, sit, watch the videos with your child and help them get through their homework, that's great. But I was blown away by the tools, wanted to know how to teach them myself. As I said, I literally changed my life in less than a year. I went from, in March, so spring break, I was still just a parent, and it's now the beginning of the fall, and I've already launched my academic life coaching business. And I sent out my emails. I have a potential client being scheduled for their first call, and I have referral meetings. I have meetings with referral partners set up in the coming weeks. So in a matter of months, my life changed. And I could not have done it just watching the anti-boring approach. That was great, again, as a parent. But if you really want to do this and teach it, you have to learn how to teach the mini lectures. You need to know the mini lectures. There's a whole strategy behind it and understanding it. I loved the connections I made with other students. We would get together during the week to practice on Facebook, and then we'd upload our videos. Working with Gretchen, the other resources, there was other readings that you would do that were recommended. They just brought so much knowledge to the table, and tools. You learn about all these tools. I just went to curriculum night at my son's school last night, and the science teacher who's teaching them biology this year is like, I told all the kids to buy cue cards because you're going to be learning. And I raised my hand. I said, do you have a problem with digital cue cards? She's like, what are you talking about? I said, Quizlet, Anki. And she says, I've never heard of those things. And I then taught all the other parents and the teacher about these tools that I learned through Gretchen. And the course just really helps you be able to be an effective teacher of the
Great.
anti-boring approach.
Well, and I'm really struck too, and so this is a nice transition into the Retrieval Practice Lab, because what we're about to do is I'm about to give you these instructions here and have you, actually, Joy, are you able to hang out for a few more minutes?
Yeah, not a problem.
Yeah, okay, so let me give these instructions first then.
Okay, perfect.
So what we're going to do is, and a reminder, if somebody doesn't want to be put in a breakout group, if you could please put that into the chat. If you don't want to say that in public in the chat, which it's fine for you to do, but you can say it privately to Summer, not to me, to Summer, because I'm about to set you up. And then what we're going to do is one of you will decide. The breakout group is not going to be that long. It's going to be maybe 7 minutes, maybe 5 minutes. So it's not that long. One person, and it's 2 people per breakout group, one person is going to become a student and pretend that you are just there receiving the mini lecture. The other person is going to be the coach or parent or teacher and teach the study cycle to the other person. If you don't know the study cycle at all, if you're brand new and you've popped into a breakout and you're like, oh my God, what do I do? What I recommend is that you have the, where it is, the mini lecture in front of you and just practice kind of reading that down and seeing if you can decipher what the steps are by reading through this. Most of you, though, I think are not in that boat. So what I recommend for most of you is that you just decide, I am going to dive in and be imperfect. I have no idea what I remember right now, but I'm testing myself to see which steps do I remember and which steps don't I remember. It's going to be messy and imperfect. I had written on here, give yourself permission to suck. And then I was like, I can't use the word suck on a webinar. And so I said make mistakes, but now I'm using the word suck. So, oh well. Give yourself permission to be bad. And this is really important, actually. This is maybe the most important thing that I teach, is too often kids are scared of making mistakes. I think I said this in the Masterclass as well. And grown-ups are even more scared of making mistakes. And I have noticed how the people who take my courses, the educators and parents, tend to be uber perfectionists and are so frightened to take mistakes or to make mistakes that they will spiral into procrastination and not get work done because they'd rather not get work done than do it badly. And I am a big believer in do it badly. If you're taking my course, do it badly. Like, skim the information. Don't even watch it all. It's better to get through it and have access to everything than not do it at all. If you're doing the mini lecture right now, just try to see what is it going to be like, what comes out of my mouth, and give yourself permission to make mistakes, because it's when, this is a little brain thing, but when we're building neural pathways, they're literal pathways of neurons in the brain, right? Like, hold on, dropped my neurons connecting to neurons, a pathway all the way through the brain. When we make mistakes, our pathway gets wider. If we make the mistake and then bring ourselves back to the accurate pathways. So we learn better when we make mistakes than when we don't make mistakes. That's one of the most important lessons I wish I could give everybody in the world. So anyway, permission to make mistakes. So I put 10 minutes here. I think we're going to do a little less than 10 minutes. I think it'll be 7. You teach the study cycle best as you can. If you have a piece of paper to draw, great. If you don't, you can pretend you're drawing or just name that you drew it. And then we'll bring you back. We'll discuss it for a little bit and see what that was like for you. And then I'll send you back to the breakout to do a different, to have the other person go. And then we'll come back and discuss that. And then I'll finish up with some teaching tips. So I'm going to pause to see if anybody has any questions about this assignment. And I'm also, while I'm pausing, I'm getting the breakout rooms set up. So actually, Joy, while I am getting the, oh, Valerie asked, how do we see each other? What's going to happen when I put you in a breakout, and because this is our first time as a group going to breakouts, it might be messy. And so if it's messy, just stay here in the main room and it's okay. Or if you show up in a breakout room and your partner doesn't show up, just come back to the main room and it'll be fine. But what's going to happen as soon as I click assign is the people who have opted to try a breakout will be given a thing you can click. And when you click it, you will appear in a new Zoom window just with your partner. So that's how you'll see who your partner is. So Joy, while I'm putting these together, I would love for you to speak to this idea of making mistakes, especially because you guys loved the retrieval practice process so much that you got together yourselves to do it outside of the class time. And so could you just talk a little bit about what that was like? Oh, and before you dive in, no, Beth, that part will not be recorded. Only what's in the main room will be recorded. Very good question. It's a totally private space between you and your partner. Okay, go ahead, Joy.
So it was, you're nervous at the beginning. I remember the first time I did it and we were recording it. I started talking way more after I had done it for myself. I think if you go into the AISSS, you'll see my practice video. Because when I did the learning cycle the first time, I decided to do it on a video and upload that. And that went better than when I was practicing in front of people. I got so nervous. I started rambling and rambling and rambling, and they brought me back. They just gave me the feedback I needed. And what I learned from the process is that I really did, as a new coach, as a new academic coach for students, I need to learn and master the mini lectures exactly as they're written. And once I've done that for, I don't know, a year's worth of students maybe, then I could play around with it. But the minute I started trying to improvise, I started making a ton of mistakes. And just teaching the study cycle, which I could do now blindfolded in 2 minutes, I took over 15 just to relay the information. So we got used to making the mistakes. It was fun. I liked getting the feedback from other people, but it takes some time to get over the fear of making the mistakes and to do it so publicly.
Yes, and I'm so glad you pushed through that. And I'm so glad that you all are here hopefully willing to just give it a try and to play with it. Because notice there were 45 people on the call on Monday and there are 12 people on the call tonight. And that just goes to show how scared people are of potentially making mistakes in front of their peers. I mean, there are other reasons too, I know. So let me see. Thank you. Okay, Susanna, you would like to try if it will work through your phone. And actually, if you don't mind, I'm going to have you be in the main room. Do you mind being on the recording with me? I know it puts you on the spot. Is it okay? So right now I have Beth and David in a room together, Kathy and Lisa in a room together, and Mel and Valerie in a room together. And I think that's everybody who wanted or who are willing to do it. And you know what? If you wind up in the room and nobody is there, there's a little thing that says join main room. And so you can just click on that and come on back. Let's see, the time is now 4:55. You probably will not have a chance to get through the whole mini lecture. I will interrupt you. I will just bring you back when the time is up so that I can keep us moving. But the goal is not to get through the whole mini lecture. The goal is to get started teaching it and see what that's like, to try and remember what the steps in the study cycle teaching are. So, oh, Lisa has to jump off. That's great. So then, Susanna, I'm going to send you in with Kathy.
Well, where do I go? How does this happen?
Just hold on just a second. I haven't sent you guys there yet.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
So you're good. Oh, good. Zoom has improved the way they do breakouts. This makes me very happy. Move to room 4. Susanna is going to hopefully, oh shoot. Oh no, see here, a bunch of people are moving. Oh dear, this is why I shouldn't do this with public people, because a bunch of people jumped out of rooms. And so now Valerie and Kathy are in their own room. Oh dear, I wish I could just drag, let's see, move to room 3. There we go. Kathy and Valerie are together. Beth and David are together. Susanna's in the main room. Oh wait, Mel, there you are. You disappeared for a second from my room.
I had to set my, I had to change my settings.
Okay, then we're gonna do this. Oh, this is working. This is working. Mel and Susanna, you are now in a room together.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that.
Okay, so I'm going to click open all rooms, and now it's 4:57. I will, you will get an alert when there is a minute left, and you can just stay in until it pulls you back. So when you get the alert, you have 1 more minute. So here you go. Have fun, y'all. Opening the rooms. So you should see a little thing that you can click. And we'll make sure that everybody, I think, yep, that's everybody who wanted to go into rooms. So that's great. So here we have either I can start answering some questions if there are some questions, or Joy and I can gab about all kinds of things that might be interesting to listen to. I also could tell a couple client stories. So maybe what I'll do is check in first to see if there are any, if Chris or Coco have any questions or any anything that would be useful to hear us reflect about. Might take a while for you all to type if you have them. So Joy, how about we just gab while everybody's in there?
Sounds good. I saw you post about your hair. I like the curly.
Thank you. I am working. Gosh, talk about retrieval practice. I am learning that hair actually, especially curls, likes to be tested. It likes to go back, like see what it knows and what it doesn't know. Like when I brush it out, that doesn't help at all in terms of building the curls. But anyway, what I think I would love to chat with you about, Joy, is did you say you were getting a client or you just got a client?
No, it's just referred a client. So we're going to hopefully have a call in the next week or two. My ideal client too. I'm really excited. It's a university student.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. And how is your son doing, with the new school year, having learned a lot of these tools from you? How is that going so far? So
I have to say final exams last year went way better than final exams the year before. His stress level was down. We had a plan. He didn't stick to it 100%. I feel like all of from spring break until the end of school, we were triaging. Like it was a very long triage. But this year we started off on a great foot. He feels very positive, very confident. And he keeps saying, like, I think this is going to be a really good year. And I've set him up and my daughter up like clients. So I meet with them. They have their own habits and grades graph. And I meet with them once a week. And we go over the week. And then I leave them alone for the rest of the week. And I'm going to see how that goes, because I love them too much to fight with them over homework.
Which is a quote from the Executive Function Summit.
The best quote.
Yes, I want to name for anybody, for Coco and anybody listening to the recording, when Joy refers to the habits and grades graph, what she's referring to is a process that I teach those who go through the coaching program, and that's different than the Art of Inspiring Students, which is the course coming up. But in the coaching program, I share exactly how I work with clients, and I keep a spreadsheet and we track important habits and how well they're following through on them. And Joy, would you be willing to share a few habits that your kids are tracking?
Sure. So if I talk about my son, I'll just keep using him as an example. So one of his things is staying organized and staying on top. So we set him up. He liked the binder, well, my modified version of the ARC system. So I'm going to see if this Mead binder actually works. So he loved that system from the get-go. And it's now to see if we're going to, when he finishes units, that he takes all the papers and puts it into the folder, the filing system on his desk. So that's one of the habits. The other habit, so using his phone is big, and, you know, separating it from himself when he's studying and in class and so on. So we have a few phone related habits. We also have habits around his self-care. So practicing mindfulness, meditation, and so on, because he does have some anxiety. So we have a bunch of habits for that. We actually had to add a few lines, because when we were going through, you had some sample habits. He was going through, he's like, oh, I want to use this one and I want to use this one. So we have quite a few of them, but he really liked being able to pick the habits, what he likes for himself. And so far he likes the fact that he's driving the boat right now. He's driving the bus. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
That's so wonderful. I'm glad you have some mindfulness things there. And he's pretty willing, even though you're a parent, he's pretty willing to work through the habits and grades with you?
So as a parent, I know I should. As a coach, it's not recommended. As a parent, I didn't give him much of a choice.
Right, I get that. But does he do it? Like he doesn't do it with an eye roll? Maybe you don't allow that. It's just like he just
you know, it's funny because I decided to do our first meeting like a hybrid. So, you know how you do the 1 hour strategy session with the students? So I did that with each of my kids back to back. I did a 1 hour strategy session. And then I said, and now we're going to put together a habits and grades graph. And so he didn't know what to expect at the beginning of the strategy session. By the end of the strategy session, I asked him, like, what value did this bring to you? And he was like, that it made me think about this, and he really liked it. And from that moment, he was good to go.
Isn't that such a good question? That what value did this conversation bring? So the strategy session, Coco, and those listening on the recording, is the session that I teach folks to have with a potential client to see if they're a good client fit. And so, Joy, you just seem like this is the epitome of how to be a parent coach to your kids, using the tools for that. So Coco had a question in the chat, and Coco, I don't know if you're a parent right now. You said, when do you offer the coaching program? If I'm interested in working with other students, would that be the best option for me? And so before I answer that, I'm curious what you meant by other students, because anyway, that would be helpful. And then I can gauge my answer according to that. So if you can answer that in the chat, then when I'm just pulling everybody back right now. So they'll be back in about 50 seconds. And then we'll answer your question and also check in with how they went. Oh, okay. So you are currently an ADHD coach who works with students. So, but it sounds like you might be interested in building and growing your practice. I'm guessing, like, I don't know if you're a new ADHD coach, but I know at the beginning it's hard to get clients or can be hard. So yes, well, I'll start answering now. The Art of Inspiring Students is this upcoming course is the first step in the training. And then, because that's the toolkit that you get. Then, if you're interested in moving on, you can either do what Joy did, which is she worked through the self-study. She didn't even join the cohort, the group that has mentoring from me. And you can either do that self-study, it's the less expensive option, or you can get mentoring with me, and that is the higher investment option. So welcome back, folks. If you came in and just heard us discussing investments, Coco was asking some questions about my coach training program. So I can come back to that later on if those of you want more information about that later. What you missed, just so you know, what you missed, if you want to come back and watch the recording for this, is Joy and I just kind of had a chat about how she has been using the Art of Inspiring Students tools with her own kids, including filling out what we call the habits and grades graph. And then she named some habits that she's helping them track this semester. So if that's interesting to you, you can check out the recording. So, okay, we have 3 groups who are back, and I would love to, we're not gonna have time to check in with each of you just yet, because I wanna make sure that we get to the second one before 5:30 my time. But I would love to hear maybe from one of you, how was that? Was that hard? Was that easy? Were you more nervous than you thought? Did it go, just what was it like to practice teaching the study cycle? Whoever's fastest on the unmute is the winner in terms of who can share, or I'll call on someone. David.
Okay. It was absolutely so nerve-wracking to try to teach it in 2 minutes.
And did you?
I did make it, but I had to really condense it in the last 59 seconds.
Yes. Well, I didn't expect you to get through the whole thing. David's partner was Beth.
Beth.
So Beth, were you at all tracking what parts of my version of the study cycle David was hitting and what parts he wasn't hitting? You didn't have to, but I'm just curious if you were.
So we didn't do, the graphic like you. It was sort of his variation that he does with his students.
Oh, great.
So that was interesting, but I could see where what he was doing related to your graphic, right? You were expressing it differently, right, David?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it was all the encoding and how you have to go back around and see what you know and don't know and try it a different way, encoding it a different way. So it was in there.
And did David go first or did you go first, Beth?
David went first and only.
Oh, and only. Oh, that's right, because we haven't gone yet. Duh. Okay. I was quick doing a whiteboard because, and actually, retrieval practice moment. And David, since you're unmuted, maybe I'll put you on the spot a little bit. Do you remember what the 3 strategic study skill sets are that I taught just recently, just a second ago? They all started with get.
Get moving. That was one.
It did start with an M. Oh, get moving. Yes. Get active. Yes, exactly.
Get active.
The other one started with an M. And I hope everybody's quizzing themselves, even though I'm talking to David right now.
I do not remember the second or third.
Manipulative.
Oh, yeah.
Get manipulative. And get
quizzing.
Quizzable. Yeah.
Quizzable. Yeah.
Quizzable is my silly word for it. So I wanted to bring these up because I want us to notice how in the study cycle mini lecture I incorporate being active, like asking questions of the student to make sure that they respond. So David, were you able to, I know you were rushing, so you might not have been, but were you able to include Beth at all in the lecture?
very, very basic. You know, it's like, do you understand what I'm saying? Those kind of things.
Okay. So do you understand rather than getting her to answer?
Correct.
Yeah, which is fine. You had very little time. And it can be a great moment if there's time to be able to say like, hey, what are you getting? What did you just hear before I move on? Yeah. So get manipulative. Probably might not, it would certainly not have happened in a small amount of time, because this is where you would at the end just say, hey, what are you taking away from this? How else could you imagine creating, like, showing the study cycle? Was there an opportunity to get quizzable as you were teaching the study cycle?
I tried. I talked about how, you know, we want to continually be moving that information from the I don't know it pile to the I know it pile. And I like the I like the tactile cards. Doesn't work well for everyone, but it does work well for a lot of people. And you can physically see those piles get bigger and smaller.
Yes, exactly. We've also, in my coach training program, we've often talked about getting like an actual basket and actually having like balls or Velcro, or, you know, we get a little wild with that. So one thing, you're not going to be able to practice it right now, the next people who are about to go. But I do want to say that it can be really wonderful if there's time after teaching the study cycle to actually ask the student to just go ahead and teach it right back to you, right there in the moment. And ooh, that reminds me of something. I want to share my screen really quickly, and then we're going to go into our next rooms. And so the next time, what I would love to have the next group of people practice, same thing, teach the study cycle, see if you can find one time to ask a question of the other person that is more than just a yes/no question, that will get them to either guess what's coming or that will get them to practice a little moment of retrieval. So that's your assignment. But let me share. This was a story that was just posted in the Facebook group for Art of Inspiring Students. Krista, who was on the Masterclass, let me make that bigger. She also has been through my programs. And so this is her story right here on the right-hand side. She asked, I think it was, a fifth grader who learned the study cycle last year to reteach her the study cycle quickly. And that was the image that the fifth grader recalled, even though a whole summer has elapsed. And I just thought that was amazing. She also commented here, I also love that she's now a fifth grader and uses the word encode and knows what it means. So that's a sign. Sometimes people ask me like, how young can you go with the study cycle? And it's a sign that I think we can actually go pretty young with it. Anyway, I am now going to send the next group back, and you have your opportunity for the other person to practice teaching. See how it goes. See if you can find a get active moment, and we'll be back. It's 5:14, so I'll pull you back probably at around 5:26 or 7, no, whatever. I'll do the math. 7 minutes from now. Here you go. I've just opened the rooms again. Okay. And good. Everyone has made it back. So, oh shoot, Kathy doesn't have, hold on just a second, you guys. Kathy doesn't have someone. I'm gonna tell her to come back. Let's see if she figures out that she can come back and we can chat together. Okay, now you can hear me. So Kathy, did Valerie teach or did you teach? Hold on, you're muted. Let us unmute you.
I'll do it. Okay.
There you go. Did she teach or did you teach?
I taught.
You taught. Great. So let's reflect for a moment then. How was that for you?
I thought it was fine. Thought it was good. I asked a lot of coachy questions because I'm a coach, and I tried to have a real scenario, and I said, what kind of student are you? What is it you're trying to study? And she said chemistry. And I said, how are you studying that? And I said, are you using a textbook? Are you using your notes? How are you doing that? So I'm reading the textbook, and then I said, well, okay. So what would you call it when you read the textbook? And then she said, memorizing. And I said, okay, but there's another word that you're getting that into your brain. So you are what are you doing then? And she said, I don't know. And I said, well, there's a word that's encoding. That means the information's getting into your brain, and it's making your brain fire in a certain way that says, I know this. And then I said, how else are you encoding this information? And she said, well, I look at my notes, but they don't make any sense to me.
So I have a question. When you asked her that question, how else are you encoding? Were you still on step 1, or was that when you had moved? You probably didn't have time to get to step 3, did you?
A little bit.
A little bit.
I asked her, how else are you encoding? Are you just reading the textbook? Is that all you're doing?
Right. But were you asking that when you introduced the idea of encoding, or were you asking her that when you were introducing the idea of encoding in a new way?
Still encoding.
Okay. Got it.
How are you getting information out from the world into your brain?
Right.
So there was reading the textbook and reading and using her notes. But her notes didn't make any sense to her.
Right.
Okay. Right. So then I said, well, how do you know that you have learned what you need to know for the chemistry test, for chemistry? So it wasn't really, I wasn't clear on this was going to be a test that she was studying for, if she was just studying to know what was going on in the class.
Right.
So that was a little confusing, because usually there's a real scenario that kids are trying to study for something.
Sometimes there's a scenario and sometimes there's not. A lot of times when I teach the study cycle for the first time, it actually is at the beginning of a school year or something where it's just like, I want you to know this brain theory and we're going to come back to it.
Okay.
But I want you to know it. I mean, other times there definitely is a scenario where it's like, test is coming up, got a D on the last test. Can I teach you a little something that will help?
Right.
The reason I asked you which encoding question was reviewing her notes was because I would consider, if notes have been taken already, then that means that she encoded while she was taking notes.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So
the way of encoding.
So the reviewing of the notes is either a retrieval practice if she's choosing to test herself while she's reviewing her notes, and see if she can remember some of the holes because she didn't understand her notes, or reviewing your notes is an encoding in a new way. Well, if you do it in a new way, it's
so let me ask you something.
Yes.
So I went back to college in my 50s. I finished my bachelor's degree while working full time.
Oh, wait, can you pause for just a second?
Yeah.
I just realized I forgot to think through the time. Do you remember what time I said it was? It was 14, I think. No, it was 16 when I sent them.
I don't know.
It's been longer. I'm going to give him one more minute and then I'm going to bring him back. I don't know how long. Anyway, go ahead.
So the way that I studied was doing the reading, and then I had to take biology, which was challenging. There was a lot of information that I needed to know for bio. So I used my index cards, and on the front, there was a question, right? And the back had the answer. So I would ask myself the question.
Yes.
If I could write, sometimes it was diagrams. It was like, what are the parts of a plant cell? So then I would write it, and then I would check the answer, and if that was right, then the card would go in a pile that I didn't need to know. But on the day of the test, I took all the cards with me, and half an hour before, I shuffled, and I went through them. So that was my active retrieval, and it told me what I didn't need, I didn't know. So that was, and for me, rewriting my notes always was helpful for me because I'm kind of a visual learner.
Yes. And with rewriting the notes, one of the things I look at in the note-taking module of my course is how, like, when you were rewriting them, were you literally copying them or were you doing something different?
I was doing a little bit different. I was making them neater, and I was drawing the diagrams better because I was writing really fast, and then I would kind of like make an outline of the highlight the important stuff. So if the professor said this will be on the test, I would highlight that in my notebook.
Great. So that you were doing, it sounds like you were doing what I would call getting manipulative. You weren't just rewriting the notes the way they were, but you were looking at them and figuring, you were consolidating, you were creating charts or creating like maybe copying a diagram or creating a new diagram.
Yeah, but it was nicer looking because when you're sitting there writing, right, and then there's a lecture, it's not that pretty.
Yes.
But I made it pretty.
Yes. Yes. So welcome back, everybody. Kathy had lost her partner. So she and I were talking about both how she taught the study cycle to her partner previously, but then also how she studied when she was a student. And I just want to say, so everybody's up to speed, one of the things we were discussing is if you are reviewing your notes, where on the study cycle are you? And so I'd like you all to, like the rest of you, to think about that. Where did this is a messy one. I didn't mean to show you this one, but I can't find the others right now. So if you're sitting down to review your notes, are you step 1, step 2, or step 3 on the study cycle? And maybe those of you with cameras on, if you could show me fingers. Oh, you're pointing, Beth, you got it. You're the encoding, the inside. Yes. And Susanna is saying side 1 as well. And I would actually say that it depends on how you are choosing to review the notes. Right, Beth, then you were just like maybe 3. And this is what I like to do with students. Once they know the study cycle, then we can drill down and get at like where exactly are you? So if you're just rereading your notes in a very passive way, then you're, encoding, but not in a new way. However, if you are rereading your notes and actively quizzing yourself, like seeing a line and then stopping and covering up and being like, let me guess what's coming next in my notes, then you're reviewing your notes as an active retrieval. So then you'd be on side 2 of the study cycle. Or if you're doing what Kathy was describing to me right when some of you came in, and rewriting your notes, not just copying them, but like condensing them, making diagrams, figuring out where main ideas are, then you are truly in the encode in a new way side. And so one thing I love to ask of teachers, and I think at this point, if I'm correct, I think at this point, David is the only actual teacher. Everybody else is a coach in the room, I think. I don't know Mel, actually. I don't know what Mel's situation is. But anyway, it can be really useful for both coaches and teachers, but in different contexts. Once the students know the study cycle, to ask them periodically, like when you're doing an assignment, wait, where on the study cycle are you right now? Right now. And if the kid goes, I don't know, it's like, great, that's okay that you don't know, but let's think about it so that you can actively get active, right? So you can actively be where you are in the study cycle. Because if you can make that conscious choice at all times, then you will be studying way more efficiently and you will get to save time. Mel, okay, you're a parent, great. So I guess a parent though could do the same thing, right? it's one of I ask parents to stop asking their kids, did you study or when will you study? Because that's the wrong question. Once a student knows the study cycle, what did you do to study and where were you on the study cycle during this study session? Anyway, let me check in with one of the other groups. How was that? And maybe not just a how was that, but was there anything that you noticed or learned either about the study cycle or about yourself by teaching that in that little instance? I guess it would be Mel and Susanna, because we've already talked to David and Beth as I look at the breakout groups.
Can I just throw in really fast?
Yeah, Beth.
That the tight time definitely makes you feel frazzled.
Yes.
Not that right, but it was just that experience of time pressure, and yeah, it always makes me identify with my students on their tests, right?
I love that you said that, actually. I love that you said that. So it's not purposeful. I was just doing the tight time for a couple of reasons. One, just because, well, mostly actually because when I've done these in the past with a bunch of strangers, you can't really trust who people are going to land with. And I don't want anyone to hang out for too long with a stranger from the internet. But we go for longer in the, when we're in the course in the retrieval practice labs. But I love that you said the empathy piece, because that's the other thing that makes me the happiest when I read the comments of the people taking my courses, and they say, because I really ask folks, pay attention to yourself as a student. I'm actually quite shocked when I'm going out to speak to teachers, that teachers actually have very little empathy for what it's truly like being a student. And I really ask folks to pay attention, because I ask folks to go ahead and take notes, practice honing your notes, practice quizzing yourself, notice what that's like. And so I just love that you felt frazzled, because that's probably how most students feel, right, when they're taking a test. So Susanna and Mel, how was that? Anything to share?
Can you hear me? Can everybody hear me?
Totally.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Imagine that. So it was great with Mel, because she, as a parent, she had a very different experience with it, and she loves the loop. I did your traditional basket one. Not that they both had the basket, but the first one.
Traditional versus
yeah. We now have the version 2. I did version 1, and it was funny because, I mean, I only learned it just recently, but I thought I was sure I just had it down. But it's true, when you go to do it with somebody else, I caught myself and was realizing that it wasn't as smooth as I had hoped, and where my arrows were going, and I had to go back to your mini lecture and just review it. But then Mel she whizzed through that loop like so fast, because it so speaks to her. That and so it was so easy for her. I mean, I think I let her speak. She typed a little bit, but in there, and she had a great way of just talking about how the encoding for her was a big lesson, that learning that we can encode in different ways. So as a student, I asked her, pretended that I didn't know how to encode, and she was great at explaining all the different ways she could encode.
Great.
It was great to hear from her. So I let her talk instead of me sharing her story.
Yeah, Mel, anything you want to share?
Okay. This is all new to me. Can you hear me?
Yes, totally.
Okay, sorry. I've never done this before. So this is new learning for me. I love the new learning loop. I love it. What I really figuratively and actively learned is that the basket to the head was a real disconnect for me, and I love the swoosh. So, I mean, it was literally a disconnect on the diagram, and I love the learning loop is just all in one. So I really
and how can you say a
went.
little bit about how and why that landed for you? Like why it was a disconnect the first time, and why the loop you're talking about.
The learning loop, yeah, the big learning loop. I love the learning loop because it's sort of just continuous. So from the basket straight up to their brain, and then the repetitive circle to the encoding. So then you could just go around, like you said, from 1, 2 to 3, and sort of circling back.
Yes.
That I don't know. I just found that the act of going back to the basket was a bit of a disconnect from the first learning I did of it. Like literally on the chart that you drew the line down to the basket, you know, and then line back up.
Yes. Here's the
I
one.
don't know how, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know what you mean. And the one thing I will say about the basket, so I haven't tried to actually teach it as the learning loop. I love that we have this new phrase now. So the one thing that I think would be missing for me if I were to teach it with the loop is that once you retrieve and assess, then, well, actually, maybe there would just be a separate basket. I think that the image of a container is helpful for the things you don't know need to be encoded in a new way. And so it's helpful for me when I teach it. I say that here, when we retrieve and assess, the things you don't know go into the basket, and the things you do know leave. So I would just want to ask you to.
But I loved
sure
Susanna made that clear. Susanna made that clear for me, because that was also a sort of a glitch the first time I went through the loop, the very first time tonight. And she said, okay, the check marks, the things you do know, you can just put those aside, and the X's then go around the circle. The X's then get re-encoded. So I didn't really need to put them back in the basket. I just need to re-encode them in a different way.
Yes. Okay.
And so I loved it. And so what I was telling Susanna is that my son's teacher had a YouTube channel, and she had all different learnings so that you could re-encode just by watching a new video. I loved it. So great. That he loved it. He's a visual learner, so that was the best learning for him. So that's all.
Yes, great. And the one thing about your son, what I would love with teachers like that, that's so wonderful they do that. And so then I just wish they had the added language of the study cycle or the learning loop or whatever you want to call it, so that they could tell students, not just learn in your style, because actually studies do prove that we need to learn in lots of different ways, regardless of our style. So make sure that you encode in a new way that you didn't encode before. And then if you then pick a different one, and then pick a different one. And if kids had that language, again, it's that slide that I showed about the brain science plus the strategy side by side. And I guess that's my movement. If I could change the world, I would have everybody.
And I said to Susanna, sometimes, you know, with a video, some people like the more complex one that has lots of detail, and some just like the cartoon version. So you have to pick which one works for you. Anyway.
Yes, exactly. So thank
now
you
you're in
so much.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Yeah, so helpful. I'm aware of time, and I can myself stay on until 6, but we have a smaller group now. I don't want to keep, you've already been here long, so I just want to swoop through these last teaching tips, and then I'll hang out and chat with anybody who wants to hang out and chat. But here we go. So the first step is to get practice at delivering whatever your version of the study cycle is succinctly, following the instructions in the handout. I often recommend that people follow my instructions first and then play with finding their own way, just so that you can really understand how all those different strategic study deals, like the get active, get manipulative, get quizzable, how they play out in my recipe before you play with it yourself. But whatever. Oh, and then use the 3 skill sets while teaching. I just said that. So getting active, asking questions to guess what's next, or have students even drawing while you teach them, having them copy, that could be one way. Having them think about how they would present the study cycle differently. And getting quizzable, have them teach it to you or each other if you're in a group context without looking at their notes, or at the beginning of every class period, like, hey, quick, turn to somebody, teach them the study cycle. It can just happen in 30 seconds. I do that with my own clients at the beginning of a session. Whatever the last mini lecture was we learned, I have them repeat it to me over the next few weeks and teach it back to me. I was planning on putting this at the end, but we're at the end, so never mind that one. Teach the study cycle at the beginning of the year, and then have students, I just said this, see, I've got this all memorized already. Have students redraw it from memory regularly through the year. But especially before tests. So this is especially to teachers, but also to coaches and parents. If it's 5 days out from the test, it can be very helpful. I just say 5, it could be 7, it could be 3. But have students remember the study cycle and then make a plan based on the study cycle. I didn't say this to you earlier, but I often will ask students, once I've taught the study cycle, I'll say, when it's time to study for a test, where do you start? 1, 2, or 3? and ask them to guess. A lot of them say, well, I should start 1, right? And this is actually why the learning loop is a better model because of this question than the study cycle, because actually I want them to start at 2 when it's time for a test. So you retrieve to see what you know and what you don't know, and then make your study plan about saving time to encode what you need to encode in a new way. That was clearly, I need to clean these up a little. Okay, occasionally ask students to evaluate your lessons and homework assignments by reflecting about where they are in the study cycle. And for coaches, I do that. Like actually, after I teach the study cycle, sometimes I will ask them, how did I use the study cycle as I taught the study cycle? And I'll see if they can kind of decode, that's a good time to use that word, how I did it. And I would love it for teachers after a lecture or after a more creative class assignment to say, how was the study cycle working in that lesson? It can just be a 3-minute conversation. It could be so powerful to do that throughout the year. We already talked about before the test, having students make a study plan. So those are just some of the little advanced teaching tips that I wanted to make sure to share with you all. But anyway, I'm going to just officially say thank you for attending the Fall 2019 Masterclass to those of you here and those of you watching the video. And I'm happy to hang out for a little bit. I hope I'll get to see some of you in my upcoming course. One of the things I know though is sometimes, like Joy, I'll meet people in a masterclass and then a year or 2 later is when I get to meet them in the course. So regardless, I hope I get to spend more time with you all in the future. But please don't hesitate to email if a little question comes up as you go along experimenting. So I'm going to do my usual, it doesn't ever feel like the official end until I unmute everybody and have voices say goodbye, and then I'll hang out if you have any questions. So we are unmuted now.
Thank you, Gretchen.
Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Welcome.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Welcome.
Bye.
See you in the course.
Great. Yeah. So, are you guys? Oh, it's just Susanna actually, because Summer, you can go.
I only have one real quick question that just keeps happening to me every time I go to teach this.
Yeah.
Every time I'm going from step 2 when I say assess and determine if you've got it, it goes out of the cycle. If you don't have it, I put the X, and then I go to draw this arrow, and it goes back into the basket of knowledge. How do you communicate? So it goes, because you don't know, it obviously goes back into the basket because it's knowledge that you need to continue to work with. Yeah. And then do you just go with the line, does it just go back around? Or I know that the step 3 is then encoding a new way. So my arrow keeps getting stuck on the basket, and I think then how do you just visually let them know you're going, or it doesn't really matter?
Yeah, I know what you mean. Let me,
I'm being very nitpicky, but
no, I love it. But that's attention to detail here, and sometimes one of the values of the mini lectures is how efficient they are, how quick and efficient they are. And so this kind of attention to detail, once you can get it, means that you'll end up saving time.
I hope so, yes.
Yes, and that's what we all need to save time, right? Whatever context we're in.
Yes, yes.
So here we have our person, here we have the basket. So you've done 1, you've done 2, you've got the check, the X,
2,
and don't know goes back in there. So when I'm telling it, what I say is, so now we're back on the encoding side. And we still have some things in our basket that we need to know for the test. But so now it's time to encode, but, so I write the word encode again, but I want you to do it in a new way. Not the same way. If you listen to a lecture the first time, I don't want you to listen again. If you've reviewed your notes before, I don't want you to review again. Something new. Does that answer it?
Perfect. That's exactly what I've got it. And now I can't wait to do it in the next course.
Yeah,
Yes, I've done my encoding.
Yes. And now you get
Yeah.
to, so you've done your encoding, right? So then you get to do retrieval practice in the next, actually for you, you can decide we don't have our first retrieval practice lab until a couple weeks from now. So if you're able to come to that one, you might decide to either try the study cycle again or to quick learn one of the new mini lectures before that retrieval practice lab and to practice that.
Yes.
I
might. I liked because of all my new clients, I did like your suggestion to try number 7, the procrastination.
Yes.
I might do that. And and I can make half of those sessions because the other ones are at 2 a.m. But the other ones for me I can make. So I'll make half of those. So hopefully some of those will work out where I can.
That's right.
I can do
they've been timed. There are 3 of each kind of call. And I tried to do it so that most people can at least attend one of each.
Exactly. And I think I can attend at least one of each. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Great.
That's right.
I look forward to it.
I forgot.
You're in the Atlantic. Yeah.
That's right.
So I'm 4 hours ahead of you. So it's like 9:45 now. So yeah.
No, 2 a.m. is not it. There were many diehards the first time I did the Art of Inspiring Students who tried, but they only lasted a few calls. And it's so funny because the academic coach in me is just like, what are you doing on this call? This is not good self-care as a student.
No, and I can't. I need my sleep, so I cannot do that one. So, but yes, I will see you on one of the first calls, but I can't wait to start the course. It'll be great.
Great.
Thank you so much for all you give. It's awesome. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Bye-bye.